Hello. Hi. Welcome to the keynote conversation portion of our 2023 Vermont Tech Jam. That brings us to the topic of our keynote conversation. Will Vermonters go for lab-grown meat? I mean, embrace the concept. Or it's also known as cell-cultivated meat or cell-cultured meat. This is not a hypothetical question. Scientists have been able to produce cell-cultured meat in labs for about a decade now. And the field of cellular agriculture took a big leap forward this summer in July when the USDA and the FDA approved the sale and consumption of lab-grown chicken. So there are two companies in the US who are actually selling this meat right now. It's going to be a while before it gets to your plate. To give you a taste, not of their meat, sadly, we couldn't get any of that for today, but to give you a taste of the sales pitch that they're using to sell this to folks and to promote this product, we want to show you a video from one of the companies, Good Meat, which is based in the San Francisco area, and they made this video in 2021. It is a promotional spot, and it is called Eating with Ian. Jake.
Wake up, I want to lift you up, I want to dress you up, let's be friends.
It was an out-of-body experience to sit there and eat a chicken, but have the chicken that you're eating running around in front of you. You don't imagine doing something like that. But then you have this realization that we've figured out how life really works, and now we don't need to cause death in order to create food. And we're gonna have to do it if we want to continue living on this planet.
So, a commercial for lab-grown meat. Yeah, so like I said, this is going to be a while before this is coming to your grocery store shelves. But there are, right now, more than 150 companies around the world and hundreds of researchers working to improve the production process for cell-cultured meat. And we are very lucky to have two of them right here in Vermont, based out of the University of Vermont, Dr. Rachael Floreani and Irfan Tahir. You might have read about them in Melissa Passanen's cover story in this week's tech issue of 7 Days, which I highly recommend. So Dr. Floreani is an associate professor of mechanical engineering at UVM. She's also the director of the Engineered Biomaterials Research Lab there. Rachael grew up in Michigan. Woohoo, Michigan. Like me. Not like me, she went to Michigan Tech and studied engineering, which is great, and got her undergrad degree there. She did her graduate work at Colorado State University, where she was one of the co-inventors of a medical implant, an orthopedic implant that has been patented and FDA approved. Rachael then she did her postdoctoral work, right, at the University of Washington in Seattle, where she was working with tissue engineering and growing cultivated cartilage and bone for joint repair. So Rachael came to Vermont in 2011. Fast forward 12 years, and now she is not just a professor at UVM, she is also the co-founder and president of Burlington Bio, which is a biotech startup based right here at Hula, and they were one of our exhibitors today. And Burlington Bio is creating materials that will help the scaling up of both cultured meat and cellular agriculture. Also today, we have with us Irfan Tahir. Irfan grew up in Pakistan. In his his sophomore year of high school, he came to the US as a foreign exchange student and lived in Minnesota. Then when he was done with that year, he went back to Pakistan, finished his high school, went to undergrad in Turkey, and then came back to the US, to the University of Minnesota, to do his master's work, and is currently pursuing a PhD in Rachael's lab at UVM. In 2017, Irfan became a vegetarian. And in 2020, when he moved to Vermont, he became a vegan. He believes very passionately in the creation of no-slaughter meat. And he is kind of an evangelist for cellular agriculture. He started the Cellular Agriculture Club at the University of Vermont, it's a student group, and he has also spoken to 4-H groups and the Governor's Institutes of Vermont. And he has on his car a license plate. His Vermont license plate reads CELL-AG, C-E-L-L, ag. So actually in 2020, it was Irfan who brought the idea of using Rachael's lab in her biomaterials work. He brought that to Rachael, and that's how this journey for them started. That's why we wanted to invite both of them here today to talk with you. So I'm really excited to welcome to the stage Rachael and Irfan. Oh my gosh, you're really here. So, I would like to start with you, Rachael. Can you tell us a little bit about your work before you started working with cellular agriculture?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always like to remind people that despite the chicken that's up on there and talking about growing meat, that I am a trained mechanical engineer. And a lot of what I do is try and make things as simple as possible and realize that us animals, we're all living machines. So in graduate school, I became very, very interested in materials that were used for orthopedic implants, but also materials that were used to replace human tissue. And specifically, I was interested in the mechanics and the physical response of that tissue, and whether or not we could use mechanics and physics alone in a material to grow the tissue. So now, I am using essentially the same techniques that I used 20 years ago, which is look at this toolbox of materials that I have, and whether it ends up being for orthopedic use or now Irfan can talk a little bit more about what he's doing with it. But I essentially create materials, and I'm trying to create materials the safest way possible and the most renewable and sustainable way possible. And so that is what I represent from the University of Vermont, is trying to do a better job improving the quality of life of people and now improving the food system around the world. But essentially, long story short, is I think of all of you and of me as machines. And I love that. I love machines. I like to mess around with it. And really what I like to do is go to the catalog, choose the materials that go into the machine. And so before I was doing orthopedic implants, I was doing cartilage, bone, you name it, doesn't matter. But now I get to use that stuff to create food. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. So thank you for that. Irfan, can you... Irfan, can you tell me, what was it that drew you to working in Rachael's lab?
Good question. When I was wrapping up with my master's, I had already decided that I wanted to get into tissue engineering, which is what Rachael is an expert in. And I applied to a bunch of labs around the US, but I did get a chance to visit Rachael. This was the week before the COVID lockdown in 2020. And we met in person. We spent, I think, about 2 days together. She took me out to Dobra Tea, and we talked about all kinds of things, not just science, but also life in Burlington, how did she get where she was, her ideas about the future. And really the thing that I saw in her was that there is this, young, passionate professor who will basically enable me to do the things that I want to do. And at that time, I was not certain that cultivated meat is what I want to do for my PhD. But I saw that spark, I saw that I could have a good relationship with her, and then I decided to pursue a PhD in UVM.
Yeah. And Rachael, I wonder if you could tell us what you saw in Irfan that made you want to work with him. Because this is, you got to work together for a long time.
Yeah, certainly. So in the beginning, when I look for a student, I want a student that, one, I can get along with, because everyone in my lab, we have to work as a functioning family, essentially. Everyone makes a mess, we have to clean up after each other. But I wanted to make sure that he would get along with everyone. And not only that, but I could tell that he really wanted to be here. He was motivated to learn. I can't drag someone through this for 4 years if they don't really know if they want to do this. It's hard work. You have to want to do this. Besides that, having a conversation with him, it was pretty apparent he was mature, he was intelligent, and he had the grit to get the job done. What we're doing is technically challenging. I knew he would be up for it, and now at this point, a couple of months from now, he will probably be a doctor and be walking side by side with me through this.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Irfan, I have to ask you, how did you end up getting interested in cellular agriculture? Like, what drew you to that?
Yeah, so it's great that you already mentioned that in 2017, I decided to stop eating meat. And then when I moved to Burlington, I really kind of ran excuses towards also eating eggs and dairy. So I became vegan. So you can say that I was already sort of aware of the problems of factory farming and was looking to contribute towards perhaps reducing that suffering of animals. My biology teacher from Turkey actually left his job as a professor to go find Turkey's only and first cultured meat startup. It's called Beef Tech. And he was the one who suggested that, hey, you know, you're a material scientist, you got some skills, why don't you look into this field? And I Googled, just like anyone else, I Googled cultured meat, cultivated meat, lab-grown meat, all of these terms, cellular agriculture. And I found this nonprofit called New Harvest, which is a donor-funded nonprofit which funds research in cellular agriculture and cultivated meat. So they have this really excellent fellowship program where they will basically fund your entire PhD, the tuition fee, the stipend, the health insurance. So it's very similar to like an NSF graduates fellowship. And I applied for that, brought forth the idea to Rachael for doing that. So I perhaps, was your question like, why did I start to get into this, or how did I get into this? I forgot.
Well, a little bit of both. I mean, I'm curious. I mean, that sort of leads to my next question, which I think you suggested yesterday. Why should all of us care about cellular agriculture?
Great. Isn't that the million-dollar question? Let's see. So I will borrow a phrase from Isha Dattar's notebook, who is the executive director of New Harvest, the fellowship that is funding my PhD. And she says that cellular agriculture is not going to change the world. Climate change will change the world. So really, it's up to us to use every weapon in our arsenal to tackle climate change the best that we can, right? So you should care about cellular agriculture and cultivated meat if you care about our environment, if you care about the animals, and if you care about the humans who are involved in all of this.
And is that because I've just read that meat production or meat consumption has gone up, like it's tripled over the last 50 years?
Definitely. Right. So I would say the best thing that you can do for the planet is stop eating meat. But that is a really hard ask. Trust me, I've been trying for 6 years. My best friends, I mean, I couldn't get them to stop eating meat because meat is delicious. It's a part of our culture. It's a part of our identity. It's not that simple to just stop eating meat. And statistics have shown that people are eating more and more meat over the years.
And that's a resource intensive. That's very resource intensive to grow livestock. Yeah.
100%. It contributes to a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. And even though we are in Vermont and we love to buy our meat from perhaps local farms and such, but if you look at the statistics, then 99.9% of all the meat that is consumed in the US comes from factory farming, and cows are the exception to that, but even in cows, that's up to 70%. So whether or not you like it or not, most of the meat is coming from factory farms. So I would say, number one, ask yourself, can I stop eating meat? If you can, that's amazing. More power to you. I do not think vegans and vegetarians are the target market for cultured meat. It's rather people who love meat, but they feel bad about eating meat. So we're trying to bring them an alternative which is less harmful for the planets and obviously less harmful for the animals as well.
And can you both, I'm not sure who wants to field this question, but can you explain to us in a way that we can all understand, how do you make cultured meat?
The process of making cultured or cultivated meat is based on the principles of tissue engineering. So I'll take you through that. So the first part of tissue engineering, which we're going to make tissue is comprised of cells, and then a bunch of proteins and polysaccharides and biomaterials that support those cells. So in order to engineer a tissue, you need to take cells from that host tissue. So whether that's from you, and they do that currently with stem cell therapy, or if it comes from a cow or that chicken. So we take those cells, and then we have to design that support system, and those are the materials that we're experts in. So we will create the materials that kind of replicate or mimic the properties of that tissue, whether it's squishy or it's hard. So we will take the cells, we'll put it on that material, and then we have to put it in something called a bioreactor, where you get the dynamics and the diffusion necessary to feed those cells and to form that tissue. And then eventually, in the case of cultivated meat, not medical tissue engineering, we will package it, and then you will cook it and serve it for food.
Right. And about how long does that process take?
It can be anything from 3 weeks to about 2 months, depending on how fast and how optimized your processes are.
Yeah. And do either of you know offhand how long it takes to raise a chicken for meat or a cow? It's a while. I should have.
Yeah.
Longer than a few weeks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
For the cow.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. Hopefully. But you're actually not growing meat in your lab up at UVM in Vody Hall. Can you tell us what you're doing there?
Yeah. So we are like the mad scientists in a kitchen, essentially. So we take a couple of different materials. Excuse me. We take a couple of different materials. In our case, specifically, we will take seaweed, which is alginate and it's edible, and then we will take some different milk proteins. What we do is we're able to process those in such a way that we get a hydrogel or a material that replicates the properties or the behavior of that native tissue. So whether that's pork belly or that would be a T-bone steak, right? So those feel different. So our expertise is being able to take these edible, these safe materials, formulate a material that feels and looks like the tissue and supports cell growth. That is our specialty. And so we do the proof of concept of the cell tissue, of the cells and the tissue growth in our lab, but ideally we will make that material and we will sell that to a cultivated meat producer.
And that's called a scaffold, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It's called a scaffold. Yeah, sorry about that.
And I can add to that, just to give context to kind of like the whole picture of what we're working with. If cultured meat is a table and this table has 4 legs, then the first leg are the cells themselves that you need from a host animal. The second leg is the nutrients that you feed to the cells so that they can grow, much like when you have to feed food to humans so that they can grow. And the third leg is the scaffolds that Rachel just mentioned. It's an essential part on which cells are able to grow and proliferate and differentiate so that they're healthy, they're happy. And the fourth leg are bioreactors, which are large steel tanks in which we're able to do this at scale.
Yeah. So I don't know if people got a chance to see the Burlington Bio booth over here. I don't know if you brought it up on stage, but you had some of these scaffolds at your booth today. Yeah, they're like little wafer-sized things that they had there. But I mean, and I think what you're talking about is creating something that the cells will grow on, and it will have it won't just be the cells, like these are meat cells, but it will actually taste more or feel more like meat because it has this scaffold. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I could take a bunch of cells and I could make a slime out of it, right? I could make like a meat slime, and that's definitely going to have a different feel in your mouth than if I was to cook a well-done steak like my grandmother does. Totally different. And according to my 3-year-old daughter, if it doesn't feel good, it doesn't matter how good it tastes. So when we designed this scaffold, when I mentioned before that we want to replicate sort of the look and the properties of the tissue, that is really, really important because the cells in your body are really smart. So if we give them something where it is a familiar home for them, they will create that muscle, they will create that fat.
Yeah, no, that's good. So my next question is about what you discovered. So you discovered something through this process that you are patenting and that is being published tomorrow, right? Like, it's about to come out. And this is what you started your company on. So can you tell us about the discovery that you made?
Yeah, so that discovery, before Irfan came on board, I was doing lung Band-Aids, so I was doing these tissue sealants, and we looked at some of the other materials that people were using on campus, and they were using milk proteins or whey proteins. And so initially, one of my scientists in the lab said, well, we're going to take some of that other stuff that you do, there he is back there, we're going to take some of the other stuff that you do, and we're going to put in some of this milk protein, and I bet you it's going to stick really well. And so we started looking at that, and then Irfan comes on board, and then we just happen to find out that, you know what, whey protein is really good for building muscle. So if any of you have done any weight training or anything, you know that it helps to build muscle mass. And so I just figured, you know, being a mechanical engineer and keeping it simple, sweetheart, I said, well, why wouldn't that work well for a scaffold? And so that's really where we ended up taking off, realized that no one else was looking at this. There's a lot of benefits, especially here in Vermont, of using milk proteins. So we went with it.
Yeah. So, and I want to make sure people understand. So you're essentially taking a waste product or from dairy and using that to help grow the scaffold.
Oh yeah, I should be specific. Yes, so it's not just the milk, although we could use that. The idea is that we actually want to use this byproduct. It is a byproduct of the dairy processing industry, which has a big place here in Vermont. And we want to, one, support them and also make sure that we are capturing all of these nutrients that are unfortunately being discarded. And so twofold, we're here working with dairy producers in the state of Vermont and the greater New England area in order to create another food product. So diverting nutrients from potentially becoming harmful to the environment to one day putting food on your plate.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and so I guess what's that?
I don't know if that was on.
It was on.
Yeah. Why did you decide to start a company, though?
Yeah, okay. So in academia, we get the privilege of working with young, brilliant minds. Young at heart. And as important as that is and as meaningful as that is to me, I actually want to change the world, believe it or not. And one way to do that is to get technology out of a university, put it in the hands of capable individuals who have a connection to the business world. And it's not only about getting the money and supporting a company, it is about, can we scale, can we manufacture, can we actually make this a product, bring down the cost so that we can affect the food system. And I knew that the only way to do that was to build a team to actually manufacture something.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some support for that here. Tech companies starting young. I think there are some people here who've started some tech companies. So that all sounds great, and this vision of cell-cultured meat is appealing in many ways. But I know that there are some things that have to happen and some problems you have to solve before we can get to this reality. So Irfan, I believe that you maybe just wrote a chapter of the first textbook on this, about some of the obstacles or challenges that the cultured meat industry is working on. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of technical challenges and also other socioeconomic challenges, which is why I had to write a chapter on it, which is open access. You have to Google creating an infrastructure for cultured meat, and if you write my name next to it, you should be able to find out. Oof, where do I start?
Well, you gave me a numbered list yesterday. So.
let's just keep it simple. The first thing is funding. So right now, the funding system that exists, it's not sustainable because most of these companies that you mentioned, the 150 companies, they're backed by venture capitalists who are looking for fast returns. Maybe 5-year timeline, at best 10-year timelines. And we're starting to see that some of those venture capitalists are not happy that the cultured meat companies that they funded are not making money. And the reason why they're not making money is because this is a very technically challenging field. So we have challenges in the engineering of the cells themselves. How good do they grow on these scaffolds? We have challenges in the material science of the scaffolds themselves as well. Where are the scaffolds being sourced for? Will the cells stick to the scaffolds or not? How can we integrate these scaffolds with bioreactors so that we can do scaling up of these technologies? We also have technical engineering challenges in bioreactors that we need to make so that we can cultivate these cells to become meat at the end of the day. So number one is funding. Number two is that it's scientifically and technically really challenging. And third is that there is a huge gap in talent. So for example, there are no degree programs where you can go and do a bachelor's degree in cellular agriculture or cultured meat. And basically the best thing that we have is that we have people who are working in other fields, and then we evangelize them or motivate them to come and work for this field. And if we're successful, that's great, but there are no sort of career pathways that a high school student can take, and then they can go and work in this field. Yeah. And perhaps the most interesting challenges are the challenges from the perspective of social sciences, right? Which is, there is this disgust factor about lab-grown meat. People are not even able to determine, should it be called lab-grown meat, cultivated meat, cultured meat, right? What kind of marketing campaigns do we need to do so that people are able to see the big picture and able to eat this? And perhaps the fourth one is that there is a really big risk of the field being monopolized and being controlled by old players who perhaps want to use this just to greenwash their own image. Yeah. So the big giants, in big ag might be motivated to use this to their advantage, and we have to work hard to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Yeah. I was going to, if you didn't mention public perception, I was going to ask that. I know from just my own experience in talking with people about this keynote, and it's partly why we chose it, to be honest. I know that eating cell-cultured meat is not maybe something that some people want to do. So I wanted to just take a quick poll, if you would. Would you raise your hand if you are interested, if you are willing to eat cell-cultured meat? Would you be interested in doing that? Oh, wow. So
that's so awesome.
That is a lot, actually.
That's awesome.
That's good. It's a good crowd.
Our job is done. I'm going to leave. Okay.
Yeah. Because I know that, that takes some getting used to, but you guys are probably early adopters anyway, so most of you, many of you. And I guess I would ask you guys, what would you say to someone who says, I don't want to eat lab-grown meat? Like, what's your response to those people you think is convincing? Yeah.
I don't know. That's tricky. So it depends on where that individual is coming from. So if that individual does care about the environment, recognizes that climate change is going to become more of a problem, then I ask them, do you drive a Prius, or do you think that electric vehicles are helpful? Do you have solar panels? And generally, people are very familiar with those methods to help lower the negative effects of climate change. However, I do want to bring up that more greenhouse gas emissions are the result of industrial animal agriculture than all of the modes of transportation worldwide. And so an environmental impact that we can have is actually reduce our meat consumption.
Yeah. And for people who don't want to reduce their meat consumption, they might be able to eat some tasty lab-grown meat sometime in the future.
They could, but I will mention that we are here in Vermont, first of all, and it is not the average of the overall United States, and I am from the Midwest, as Cathy mentioned, and my family is very resistant to this type of thing. So if I can win them over, then I feel like I've really done my job in scientific communication, right?
Yeah. And speaking of, I did want to mention, we're going to have a question and answer time very soon. And we've got a mic stand out here for folks. But since you brought up your experience growing up, I know that you, Rachel, are a female person in a very male-dominated space. And I just wanted, Irfan, you're a trailblazer in terms of embracing cellular agriculture, and Rachel is also a trailblazer in many ways. And I'm just wondering if you could talk about that. I read in Melissa's article that you're the first in your family to go to a 4-year school, but also that you didn't have a female engineering professor at Michigan Tech until your senior year. So has it changed at all? Has that field changed at all?
No. And I really thought it would. Like, when I first started graduate school, they're like, this is great. You know what? When you start teaching, it's not going to be like this at all. No, it's the same. But I will say that I don't feel like an outsider. It's an inclusive community. That's sort of where we are. I'd say in general, I don't feel like I stand out. The only time that I recognize that I stand, the most meaningful time that I recognize I stand out is when I have students who associate as female or non-binary. They come to my office and they're like, I feel comfortable talking to you. I feel like possibly I could be an engineer. Can you possibly tell me how I could go to grad school? And I know it may seem weird, but that happens. And I recognize that I can stand here and I can show them that it's possible and let's do it. And it's inclusive, and I'm not going to single any of them out, but I will say that anyone can do it. I have a really good time. But at the same time, I also want to show them, all of my students, some of which are here today, that in order to get here, you have to show up. You have to have grit and you have to have integrity. And you know what? Most of you have that. So if you have that and you recognize that you have the skills and you have the curiosity to try and solve problems, then you can be up here on stage.
Yeah, great. Yeah, Rachel, you definitely have fun. I have had so much fun with both of you, just getting to know you and talk with you so many times, and it's just been really great. So I appreciate that. I think that we are going to go to a Q&A, and I bet people have some questions. I'm going to pass off this mic, and it will be in the center of the room as Jillian is reaching us. So if you have a question, we're going to ask you to come up and step up to the mic and ask it.
My question is, excuse me, what you're doing in the lab, how is that different than what is currently being done with commercial lab-grown meat?
Definitely, yes. So the commercial lab-grown meat or cultivated meat that is in the market right now is really in the form of a cell slurry, which then they process into chicken nuggets or sausages or things that cell slurries can be processed into. So what we do is that we focus on giving structure to these muscle cells and muscle tissues so that it's more of a steak, more of a chicken breast rather than a nugget or a sausage. So these can be high value items such as a Wagyu steak, which has a really high fat content. So we don't just work with muscle cells, but we can also work with fat cells. And food scientists actually have known this for a while, that a lot of the taste of meat, the delicious taste, comes from fat. Or I've heard that meat eaters have also known this for a while. Yeah. It's just that I'm not one, so I wouldn't know. But we brought on a trained chef who is now interested in doing a PhD in our lab, Kevin, who's here in the audience, and he will, I think, help us determining that and filling the gap between my knowledge about meat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And I realized, sorry, I didn't ask this question, I forgot. I wanted to ask, so we have not tried lab-grown meat, but they have, right?
Yes.
And so could you just tell us how it tastes?
Yeah, I can go first. I got a chance to try cultivated salmon on a bagel with precision fermented cream cheese, so a cream cheese that was made without animals. That was my first time trying meat in, I think, 5 years, so I'm the worst judge in the world of cultivated meat. But I think it tasted a little fishy. I wanted more. I wish there was more. That's really all I can say. Maybe Rachel has a better idea.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I don't enjoy eating that much meat, but when I do, I like really good meat. So it was a blind test, and it was a traditional ground beef, slaughtered ground beef burger, and then they had the ground beef burger mixed with the plant-based, and then it was Wagyu burger mixed with the plant-based. And I actually preferred the Wagyu burger, and I will say it's not, they didn't use the La Platte Farms, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but they didn't use really good burger, right? They used like, not slime, but, and so it was kind of easy, but I will say I preferred the taste. It almost seemed cleaner.
So the Wagyu was cultivated?
Yes, sorry, it was cultivated Wagyu, if I didn't make that clear, yeah.
Next question.
Hi, it's really interesting to hear you speak about this. So let me stand up straight. It's a little bit easier for me to talk. My name's Laredo Solo, by the way. I am a very part-time cattle farmer in central Vermont, as well as living here in Burlington, just in terms of full disclosure. So I've witnessed the type of energy inputs that it takes to grow cattle here in Vermont, especially primarily beef cattle, right? And so it's honestly pretty minimal. You put them in the field and you give them water and a place, a run-in shed, and they take care of themselves pretty much year-round. Of course, we have to make hay for the winter, et cetera. So there's definitely some energy inputs, but it's pretty minimal. So you were saying how you believe that cultured meat will be a green alternative to pastured meat. Now you were talking also about industrial produced meat. I'm not familiar with the feedlots of the Midwest and their energy implications, but I am familiar with growing meat here in Vermont. And so I guess my question for you is, if you I have two questions. One is, have you done a real complete life cycle type of analysis of the carbon cost of artificial meat, or is it just too preliminary in terms of what you're doing and in terms of the necessary technology to grow it? Can you look ahead and predict the actual energy input or carbon cost of growing a pound of artificial meat?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's debatable, actually, when people start thinking about the scale. Some of the engineering hasn't been figured out. And so if you look at the lower end, then yes, it is less intensive. Less water is required, less land is required. But then there's other individuals who argue, because you have to take the meat, the cells in the scaffold, and put it in a big vat of liquid, essentially. It's like chicken noodle soup. And so that can also be energy intensive. One thing I will also mention, though, is it's not just the feedlots of the industrial farming. And I respect farmers. I know farmers. We aren't fighting farmers like you. We are fighting those very intensive industrial farming. But it's all of the land that is used to grow the food to feed the cattle, that is very energy intensive. And where we are growing that food is a part of our country where we are starting to see water problems. So it's not that cultivated meat is really the answer. It is that our food system in general needs to really have another analysis. And one way that we can try and help that is to try and make some food in the lab.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you that the current industrial way that meat is essentially manufactured on the hoof is ridiculous and is not sustainable and is not going to work out. I guess my other comment about what you're doing is, once again, just extrapolating well into the future. And maybe this is irrelevant because of what you were talking about just now. I know that in the community where I have my cattle is Pomfret, Vermont. And in that community has actually suffered recently because of the decline of dairy. And so the community as a whole is looking at expanding beef production to compensate for the lack of grazing, because dairy production is, basically dairy farming no longer exists in the town. It's completely shut down. And so we have beautiful fields, gorgeous fields, like most of Vermont. In order to preserve those fields, the only way we can see to do that is to continue to graze them. Brush hogging them once or twice a year really makes no sense in terms of energy consumption. So why not graze them and then be able to eat the meat that comes off of those fields? It seems like a good idea to those of us in that community. And so as we extrapolate forward, if we reach the point where there was a lot of artificial meat, what's going to happen to the landscape in places like Vermont?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So one quick thing is, when we think about cellular agriculture and what we're trying to do to improve just the quality of life in the environment and reduce our dependence on resources, is to sort of look to our partners in regenerative agriculture, because essentially we are all working towards the same thing. We want to go back to the land. We want to try and help Mother Nature, and we want to provide nutritious food for people.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Skylar Bagden from Varied Technologies. And as somebody that spends pretty much every day thinking about what the path is to a more sustainable future, I want to thank you both for the work that you do to help build that for all of us. And I want to ask you about kind of the path to market for your technology. And I had two questions, and so I'm morphing them into one. One of them was about the path for your business, but also you as an individual, Rachel, and how you balance the needs of your company with the needs of your research. And at this stage, how you kind of prioritize a commercial focus versus kind of a fundamental scientific research focus in kind of your daily focus, as well as the work that your company does.
Oh, boy. Good question. Yeah. I don't even remember the first question that you asked, so can I address the most recent one?
They were related, so sure.
They're all related. Okay, good. So I not only started the company so that I could translate the technology so that we could mass produce this, bring down cost, and try and help the environment. The other thing that I really enjoy is bringing up the workforce, right? Like educating these young, vibrant, motivated, highly intelligent, soon to be on the job market, hopefully for me, no, you can't have him. But educating them, that is one of my greatest joys, because if I start one company, that's one company. But if I can graduate 20 students, that's 20 companies. And so then I'm able to really have a greater impact and make greater change. But how do I balance that? That's a very good question. So what I did is I was able to take some part of this technology that I work on, but I have a large group of students in my laboratory, and we are doing everything from designing delivery vehicles for chemotherapeutic delivery to still working on reproductive health. We have a Culinary Institute of Arts chef working with us now, looking at different techniques of cooking. And so the research in the laboratory continues to be interdisciplinary, continuously changing, and maybe some of that technology will spin off into another company. But that's really how we separate them. Is one, it is objective driven, we have to make a product, and the other one is, can you turn into a really good doctor?
Awesome. Thank you so much.
And to quote Melissa, who wrote the article, Rachel and I, we are just a few meat cells in a 50 billion cell hamburger. So the idea is that with Rachel's company, it sets a positive example so that we have more such ventures here in Vermont. Really.
Hi there. My name's Dan Hibbs. I'm the president of the UVM Entrepreneurship Club. And I'm currently reading the new biography on Elon Musk. And so this question is inspired by that.
Perfect.
So, raising livestock has been a very resource-intensive method of food production, especially regarding land use and physical space. Since lab-grown meat requires a far smaller physical footprint than raising livestock, do you believe there are plausible applications of lab-grown meat in long-distance space travel, such as voyages to Mars?
I'm happy to take that one. No, it's really interesting that you mentioned that, because the first ever project that was funded by NASA in lab-grown meat in 1998 was to see if we can grow fish cells for long-term space travels. So think about long-term space travel, and is it more resource intensive to pack a bunch of animals or a bunch of cells? And one vial of cell can produce many animals. So yes, I think it is one way that you can go about it. And public organizations like NASA have been interested in this field for about 20 years, and they hopefully will continue to fund some more projects in this. And there are companies who have organizations that are focused on producing meat for humans here on Earth, but they do have wings that are focused on long-term space travel. So if you want to look into them, there is a company called Aleph Farms. They have a wing where they're looking into that. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the work you're doing. My question is really about food security, and I feel like the easy question is, well, how do you see this impacting food security? But the harder question is, what are the things you're thinking about that could be negative impacts of your technology on food security and different communities all over the place that might have different food sources, different access to education to learn how to run a factory like this? So what are some of the pitfalls that you've thought about that this could impact food security negatively, and how are you thinking about addressing that or approaching that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. That deserves a two-part answer. The first one is the privatization of food. And so if this becomes a hot commodity and you have a couple of companies that take this over, then we're not really doing our job, because I honestly became very, very passionate about this when I realized where the food was being grown to feed the cows that we eat and where the starving children are. They come from the same place. And that broke my heart. And so food security is huge for me. The problems that we will see in the future are the problems that we have today, and one of those is access to food. So if we think of cellular agriculture as this urban farming, then will we really be able to feed those that live away from communities? However, more people are moving to the cities. So in terms of food security, yes, absolutely, it will help. There's going to be more people on the planet, and we need more food. And I am not a trained chef. It's probably a good thing. And I am not a farmer. And so I am an engineer, and I have a laboratory. And I am doing what I can to help feed people.
Yeah, and just to add a caveat to that, I would say, Rachel said that it will help with food insecurity. I would actually say it has the potential to help. And whether or not it does, it's up to us. So getting interested early on in a technology. So just to remind everyone, this is the first decade of this technology really taking shape, right? So we're in it for the long haul, at least for the rest of my lifetime. I see myself working in this and then contributing towards it, which is why we need like more young and motivated people. So it has the potential to help with food security, especially as climate change negatively affects some of the communities. But we have to really steer that in that positive direction rather than just expecting it to happen on its own.
Hi. So one of the first memories of, well, hearing about the scientific progress on synth meat, as it were, is, I don't remember which college it was, but hearing a headline that said, yes, it took scientists X number of months or years to grow this single hamburger. Now they're going to see how it tastes. Of course, things have come a long way since then, and the fact of the matter is that industrial meat gets a lot of subsidies, but how can you speak to what might, in my opinion, be the major bottleneck in public uptake of lab-grown meat, which is price and volume.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So price and volume, if you can make more of it, you drop down the price. And there's a lot of engineering challenges. So there are and were a lot of really, really good people behind this entire thing. And what we need now, and sort of what Irfan and I represent, is bringing on board the manufacturing engineers, the mechanical engineers, the materials engineers, to take some of our traditional experience and training and put that towards something like cellular agriculture. Because if we, whether you like it or not, the Industrial Revolution essentially improved our quality of life through innovative technology, and so that's essentially what we're trying to do.
Can you give an estimate to approximately how long it would take to grow in the lab an equivalent amount of meat as it would for, let's just say, as a cow?
Pass.
Fair enough.
No, I would say if cost was not an issue, which is the biggest issue right now, then 3 to 6 weeks, I would say.
Okay, so that's favorable at least.
But to bring down that cost, we have a lot of technical challenges to solve, and that would take many years.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. As a science teacher, I'm wondering if you have any stories of accidental discoveries or very intentional discoveries, and how those help to progress the work you're doing.
I love that. The reason why I got excited is I think playing and creativity is the biggest way that we learn. So whether you're in preschool or you're, in your 40s, playing around actually helps stimulate the brain, and you think of things maybe that you wouldn't have been constricted of if you wrote out an entire experimental design. So a couple of questions that I had when I was looking at this milk protein thing was, okay, so the problem that I'm hearing from some of these producers is that they have some waste and they would really love to just have clean water and then they can reuse that clean water. That's cool. And then what I have is I have a material where when I put it in water and then I cross-link it, or I take a fishing net and essentially pull it all together, that I can create a solid substance. And I'm making that out of seaweed and some of this milk protein. So what I accidentally kind of found out is if I take some stuff and mix it together in a very unique way, I'm able to get what I want, and they're able to get what they want. And it only happened because I was essentially like trying to modify a recipe with absolutely no rules, and I had a lot of fun doing it. But I really encourage that tactile, at the bench, experimentation. This gets slimy, this doesn't get slimy. And my favorite thing to do is to do outreach, and that's what a lot of us in the laboratory do. I will say that a lot of what I do, by the way, especially being in education, I am motivated by my 3 children. And I'm not trying to turn them into engineers, but all I'm trying to do is get them to question everything around them. And I think that is one of the biggest things that you can teach people, is to question everything around them.
Hi, I'm Bruce Hennessy. I'm with Maple Wind Farm in Richmond, Vermont, which is right down the road. 25 years in regenerative agriculture. And I must say, some of what I've heard tonight has been, or this afternoon, has been somewhat disturbing. Particularly the part about we know how life works. And I really have a hard time with that. So I just wanted to be open and honest about that piece. I do appreciate your inclusive approach and your ability to answer those questions. I've got a couple of questions. One is, it seems to me that there are a lot of materials that wouldn't normally go into a chicken that are being used to build lab-grown chicken. Are you willing to be transparent about those materials? And who's going to decide whether that's safe for people to eat?
Good question. Yeah, I'd say that as engineers, you forget about the business world aside, we are trained to be completely transparent, because if we're not and no one catches our mistakes, then people could die. That's just to put it bluntly, okay, if we design an airplane or something. So no, I truly believe in transparency, and my students need to tell me everything that they're doing. They need to tell me. As far as the things that go into cultivated meat versus the things that go into, let's say, traditional farming, not even necessarily regenerative agriculture, is you don't know what's in that meat that you're eating. I dare ask any one of those industrial farming, JBS for example, to disclose exactly what they feed those animals, what is in the shots that they give those animals, how they kill that animal, how they process that animal, sterilize that meat, and serve it to you. I don't think they tell you everything that's in there. And so I'm not saying that, hey, they're worse than we are. All I'm saying is that, again, if you question what is around you, you will start to find that science isn't that scary, because we really want to be transparent to the public.
I'm not a technophobe, but I can tell you we are completely transparent about everything that goes into our product. Okay, just to be clear. What I'm hearing is also that we're going to replace one factory, the factory farm system, with another factory. And, you know, you can't make something out of nothing. There's going to be a tremendous amount of energy and material and you name it, labor, whatever it is, to build a chicken, whether it's on my farm or in your lab. And I guess I'm curious about the other aspects of regenerative agriculture that we could support with the same amount of money, time, and energy that we're putting into things like this initiative that could mitigate climate change on an even more impactful level. So I struggle with that. You know, for instance, if we were to take all agricultural land and add 1% of soil organic matter to that, we would essentially erase the carbon issue right now. So just help me understand why replacing one factory with another is.
Yeah, that's a great question. And in fact, that's not what we're trying to do. I really respect that you would perceive it that way. But it's not that we're trying to necessarily switch one factory for another. We're trying to maybe just add more. So if we focus on the value, I focus on the value of food security, animal welfare, environmentalism, that is a whole nother thing. Yes, there's a lot of food waste. Yes, there are other problems with our food system, but again, there's more people, and more people want to eat meat. And in fact, in some countries around the world, the animals that they rely on as part of their culture are becoming endangered. They no longer are able to eat that meat. So all I am trying to do, this is my personal opinion, is just add to what you all are trying to do. Because if we can help add to that food system, that doesn't put more strain on you. That allows you to look at what you are best at and do your job. And so we're just trying to add to that.
Thank you.
Great. Another question? No.
Hi. First of all, I'm wondering if you can go into more detail on the environment that you have to create so the cells can grow in the lab environment, and how you create that little environment for them, because that sounds really difficult. And then for the engineers in the room whose minds might hold solutions to the technical problems that you are facing for scaling and stuff like that, could you go into detail a bit more on those technical challenges and how to scale and all that stuff, please?
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing for the microenvironment for the cells to thrive on is to look at the cells themselves and see what kind of cells they are, because different cells have different requirements, right? Some are same for every cell. For example, we need an animal body temperature, so 37 degrees Celsius. We need animal body humidity, right? So like 5% carbon dioxide, things like that. But we design materials which recapitulate physiologically the conditions in which these cells are growing inside the animal's body. So for example, muscle cells have a hierarchical structure. So they grow as undifferentiated myocytes, and then they undergo this process which is known as differentiation, where they start to fuse together and become these multinuclei cells. These tubes of cells called myotubes then become fascicles, which become fibers, which is what your bicep is kind of made of. So when we're designing these materials and we're thinking of these mechanical cues that we can provide these cells, then perhaps it would be advantageous for me to design grooves or irrigation channels inside my materials so that I can help these muscle cells fuse together and become myotubes. Now that's muscle cells. Fat cells is completely different, right? For example, fat cells, when they differentiate, they actually lift off from the material itself. So perhaps you want to create a microcarrier or an enclosure so that they don't kind of swim around in the tank itself, and they're able to stay together, stick together, right? There's all kinds of cell biology, scientific techniques that you can do so that these cells are able to grow in a better way. And on the technical challenges, I mean, there are so many. On the scientific front, for example, in terms of cell line engineering, right? Like cells can grow only to so many doublings or passages. So you need to figure out how can you make the cells grow better and stay healthy while they're doing that. Or if you're an engineer, a mechanical engineer, chemical engineer, or electrical engineer into robotics and control systems, then we need to design better bioreactors. Even the biggest, largest industrial bioreactors, which I think the largest one in the world is about 20,000 liters, and the largest cultivated meat bioreactor is only 6,000 liters, is nothing even if we want to replace 1% of all the factory farmed meat that's out there. And then perhaps one of the biggest challenges comes in the nutrients that we feed these cells. Those are really expensive, and right now the way that we obtain them is extremely cruel. So we need to find alternatives for that and find perhaps plant analogs or proteins that work better than the ones that we use right now.
Yeah. And that was interesting engineer talk that I was trying really hard to find. I know, yes, right? But there's also, in addition to engineering challenges, there's lots of other types of people who you need to work on this. And I was really interested yesterday when we were talking about how not just social scientists to figure out marketing campaigns or something, but to really think about religion and like the role that food plays in your life. And
religion is huge, and a lot of people's actions are, of course, motivated by religion. And there are advances that are being made there as well. So for example, the chief rabbi in Israel has actually already given the approval for cultivated meat as being kosher. That's his words, not mine. Or Saudi Arabia is pushing for a halal certification because they want this to get to a lot of people. But let's just talk about the elephant in the room, right? There is a lot of money to be made using cultivated meat. Nobody has made that money yet. But there is a lot of money to be made. So JBS, Tyson Foods, Middle Eastern countries, China, USA, right? Everyone, perhaps they'll come to you and they'll say, we care about this because we care about sustainability, because we care about the environment. But a lot of the times they really just care about the money, right? Yeah. So we have to tread carefully and make sure that this doesn't get into the hands of the wrong people. And the wrong people are the ones that I perhaps mentioned by name just now.
And it was also, I also found it really interesting when we were talking. Irfan just got back from a conference, an international conference. Where was that again?
In Netherlands.
Yeah. And we were talking about the differences. There's this is controversial here. We've heard from farmers, which I would be really disappointed if we didn't. At this talk, so I'm very, very appreciative of that perspective. But in this country, we have an approach to this, or a certain way if we think about this. That's not the same as these exist. They're a little bit different overseas. And you were telling me yesterday that when you walked into did you go to the fast food chains?
Yes, McDonald's, KFC, Burger King, all of those in Netherlands have a plant-based menu that is bigger or as big as the meat menu. And not just that, but things are labeled differently there. So the exact same Ben & Jerry's ice cream is labeled non-dairy in America, but labeled vegan in Netherlands because
vegan, as you know, is a controversial term.
Right, here, yeah. And so the economic impact of this potentially is not just about the United States. It's really about the world. So that's important to consider as well.
Exactly. And I would say let's just assume that we have solved all of the technical challenges of cultivated meat. In my opinion, they would still take a few decades, but let's just assume that we've done that. Even then, it will not be easy to sell this in the US because of the highly politicized atmosphere that is here, because of the public perception of different things, and most importantly, because of the distrust that the public has in government organizations and public organizations. So we have a lot of work to do, that's all I would say.
We have time for one more question.
It's you. Wondering about the health benefits and if you, like, in terms of marketing that, and also if people will say, well, there's no B12 or there's no iron. I mean, how will you reproduce all of the things that come in red meat, for example?
That's a really great question. Yeah. So some of the questions are, how do you recreate something and maybe you're not able to put everything in there that you would find naturally? So what is really beneficial is that when we look at creating food from scratch, is that we don't necessarily have to follow the defined rules of nature. So we have the ability in the medical field to look at an individual and say, can we come up with some sort of medicine or a treatment that is personalized to you? So the possibility would be is that food is medicine, and we could take that literally. And so that would be one possibility, is to supplement all of that in there. But then someone who has a certain health condition that isn't able to eat a traditional steak or a bowl of ice cream, wouldn't it be really cool if they could?
Or allergies, or
allergies.
So perhaps taking out those allergies, or yes, we have that ability to be a little bit creative about the nutrition aspect of this. Yeah. And can we take one more question? Because I see my friend Mark kind of waiting.
Oh, Mark.
I'm just curious to know what he will ask.
All right. This question's for you, Irfan.
Okay.
So, yeah, thanks for calling me up. I wanted to ask you about more of like the agriculture landscape. So I know you did an internship in the Bay Area here last summer. So you've had experience with some of these venture capitalists where the money's going to fund lab-grown agriculture, right? And I think a challenge that I see is that we need to come together with the regenerative agriculture farmers that we have. There's some in the room that have made their thoughts known, and I think they're valid. So my question is this. The people who are funding the development for lab-grown meat, what are they doing to be stewards for the environment as well? Because you see what the regenerative agriculture is doing. They make it part of their mission to do something with the landscape as well. So I think it'd be great, lab-grown meat, if they also put money towards that. Is that something that you see? Let's go on, Rachel. Thanks.
I'll give a short answer.
Yeah, I wasn't supposed to.
No.
You can feel free to. I'm just curious because he had the.
Occupational hazard. Go ahead.
I'll give a one-line answer.
Yeah.
So there's an excellent opinion paper in the journal Nature called "Cultured Meat Needs a Race to Mission and Not a Race to Market," which talks exactly about what you just said and how we need to do that. Rachel, please.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. So just like in any category of individuals or any group of people, you have, wouldn't necessarily say a binary spread, but right, you're going to have people who are there for the greater good, and then you're going to have people there who are essentially for a quick reward. There are a lot of people, especially there's celebrities, right, that have come out and they have helped fund some of these companies. The idea is that, again, the overall food system is sort of broken. And there are a lot of people who are here, not physically, although yes, I'm sure, but here on Earth that are recognizing that a change needs to be made. And one of the new races to space is going to be cellular agriculture. And I really, really do believe that there's a lot of people here who want to try and make a difference, and food is one of those.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your question.
So, yeah, I think we've reached the end of our talk. I really appreciate both Rachael and Irfan and this opportunity to talk with you. And thank you, everyone, for listening and for coming to the Vermont Tech Jam.
Thank you.